Most households run out of cooking capacity long before they run out of food. That distinction matters more than almost any other variable in emergency food planning, and it is the one almost nobody accounts for until they are standing in a dark kitchen with a fully stocked pantry and no way to use any of it. Research on household emergency preparedness consistently finds the same pattern. The overwhelming majority of stored food is heat-dependent: pasta, rice, frozen meals, dried beans. All of it conditional on a functioning stove, reliable gas, and stable electricity. All of it useless the moment any one of those conditions fails. These 12 foods operate without any of those conditions. No heat, no tools, no preparation infrastructure of any kind. All available at any grocery store right now. Number 12, tortillas. The instinct in emergency carbohydrate planning is bread. Familiar, comforting, and structurally wrong for the purpose. Bread spoils within days under normal conditions. It crumbles under handling pressure. Pack it into an evacuation bag and it arrives as fragments. Leave it through a warm weather power outage and the clock is already running before the outage ends. Tortillas operate in a different category entirely. A sealed pack of flour tortillas outlasts most bread by a significant margin under identical storage conditions. Flat and thin, they compress efficiently. A pack of 10 occupies roughly the footprint of a small notebook. They survive being packed, moved, and handled without structural failure. The functional case goes beyond shelf stability. A tortilla is not just a food, it is a delivery system. It converts separate components, tuna, beans, peanut butter, jerky, into a single handheld meal requiring no plate, no utensils, and no stable surface. In a scenario involving movement or simultaneous management of multiple people, that one-handed functionality is an operational advantage with no direct equivalent in this category. Keep a few packs stored, rotate them through normal cooking every couple of months. Inexpensive, widely available. Among the most functionally useful items in any no-cook supply. Number 11. Instant oats. The assumption embedded in most emergency planning around oats: they require heat. That assumption is incorrect, and it removes one of the most effective no-cook foods from consideration in most household supplies. Instant oats prepared with cold water, stirred, and allowed to rest for 15 to 20 minutes reach a consistency close enough to cooked oatmeal that the difference is manageable. The technique is called cold soaking. Long-distance endurance athletes and hikers use it routinely when carrying a heat source is not an option. The preparation requirement is water and time, nothing else. The nutritional case is specific and distinct from everything else on this list. Most shelf-stable emergency foods provide protein or fat. Both are necessary. Neither delivers what oats provide: sustained, stable energy through slow metabolizing complex carbohydrates and dietary fiber. Research on glycemic response consistently documents that high-fiber grain meals maintain stable blood glucose significantly longer than refined carbohydrate alternatives. A portion of cold-soaked oats can sustain stable blood glucose for 3 to 4 hours. At the start of a demanding day under difficult conditions, that slow-burn energy profile has a direct effect on cognitive and physical performance. Oats are also highly compatible with other items on this list. Combined with peanut butter, fat and protein added, combined with canned fruit, moisture, and natural sugar added, combined with nuts, caloric density added, one ingredient, multiple complete meal configurations, shelf life, years when kept dry, storage requirement, clean water must be accessible alongside them. Without water, cold soaking is not possible, and this food disappears from the available options. Number 10. Canned fruit. Something specific happens around day 2 or 3 of living from a standard emergency food supply. The body, fed on dense, dry, protein-heavy food for consecutive days begins signaling for something categorically different. Different texture, different flavor, moisture. This is not an arbitrary craving, it is a documented physiological pattern. Research on dietary monotony demonstrates that appetite suppression from sensory fatigue is a measurable, real response, not a psychological preference. Ignoring it in emergency food planning creates a predictable behavioral problem. Intake declines not from shortage, but from resistance to eating what is available. Canned fruit addresses this in a way nothing else on this list does. Most people identify the caloric value and the vitamin C content. What they miss is the liquid. The juice or syrup inside every can is a secondary hydration source. In situations where water is being rationed, that moisture has real operational value. The instinct to drain it is automatic under normal conditions. In an emergency, that instinct becomes a waste that cannot be afforded. Beyond hydration, natural fruit sugars enter the bloodstream rapidly, producing a fast, measurable increase in alertness and blood glucose. This is not sustained energy. When someone is genuinely fatigued and needs to function within the next 20 minutes, that rapid response has a specific and valuable application. The mood dimension documented in disaster psychology research, sweetness has a measurable moderating effect on psychological state. After multiple days of flat, salty, dense food, a can of peaches makes conditions feel briefly more normal. In a prolonged disruption that is not trivial, store several cans. Rotate through regular use. Do not omit this category. Number 9. Protein bars. The framing that undersells protein bars in emergency planning, gym supplement that doubles as backup food. The framing that accurately captures what they do, blood glucose restoration tool for maintaining cognitive function under resource-limited, high-stress conditions. The connection most people have not made: when blood glucose drops below a functional threshold, not slightly low but genuinely depleted, cognitive performance degrades alongside physical performance. Studies on people in resource-limited, high-stress environments consistently document this. Decision speed slows, error rates increase, the capacity to manage competing priorities begins to fail. In a crisis, impaired judgment is frequently the more dangerous outcome, not hunger, not fatigue, but the inability to think clearly at the moment when thinking clearly is most consequential. A protein bar, typically 180 to 220 calories and 8 to 12 grams of protein, is not a complete meal. It is sufficient to restore blood glucose above the threshold where decision-making begins to break down, and to maintain it there for several hours. A bridge, not a foundation. The packaging reinforces this use case. Individually wrapped, compact, durable, no refrigeration required, tolerates temperature variation better than most foods. Build a rotation, consume periodically, and replace. Not the foundation of a supply. The reliable fallback when everything else requires more presence of mind than the current moment allows. Number 8. Crackers. On paper, crackers have no business on a serious emergency nutrition list. Low caloric density, no impressive nutritional profile, and yet they appear on nearly every well-researched preparedness guide. The reason has almost nothing to do with nutrition. Here is what actually happens when an emergency extends beyond the first day or two. People eating from individual components, a spoonful of peanut butter, a handful of nuts, a pouch of tuna, stop experiencing meals. They start experiencing maintenance. The act of eating, stripped of all structure, becomes purely mechanical. Research on disaster psychology consistently finds that the loss of normal mealtime structure measurably affects morale and the psychological resources needed to stay functional under sustained pressure. Crackers interrupt that pattern. They introduce structure. Tuna placed on a cracker becomes something assembled. Peanut butter spread across a cracker becomes something composed. The brain registers these combinations differently than the same ingredients consumed separately. A small act of construction has occurred. That signal matters more than most emergency planning guides acknowledge. There is also a practical rationing benefit. Eating piece by piece naturally moderates consumption rate without requiring willpower. When supplies need to stretch across uncertain days, anything that reduces intake automatically has real value. Choose low-sugar varieties with a simple ingredient list. They store longer and pair more broadly across other items in the supply. Number 7. Nuts. There is a phase in almost every emergency that preparedness guides underemphasize. The first hours, before any routine is established, before the situation is fully understood, when people are moving quickly, gathering information, managing others, and making decisions under pressure simultaneously. During that phase, one characteristic of food matters above all others: the ability to eat while moving in any condition, without stopping, without preparation, without hands free to assemble anything. 1 ounce of nuts, 160 to 200 calories, healthy fats, some protein, magnesium, and potassium. Fits in a jacket pocket, no cans to open, no packaging to assemble, edible standing up, in the dark, in poor weather, while managing everything else. That simplicity is the feature, not a secondary characteristic. One consideration worth planning around: salted varieties increase thirst. When water is limited, that matters more than most people account for in advance. Maintain a mix of salted and unsalted. Track water intake carefully when nuts are carrying a significant share of daily calories. Pre-portioning into small bags before an emergency prevents the most common practical failure. Nuts are easy to overconsume in the moment. Measured portions made in advance remove the need for discipline when discipline is already stretched thin. Sealed containers away from heat and light. Vacuum-sealed bags extend shelf life further. Unlike most items on this list, nuts require absolutely nothing from the surrounding environment to function. Number 6. Peanut butter. When emergency nutrition specialists are asked to name a single most efficient pantry item, the same answer recurs more consistently than any other. The numbers explain part of it directly. 2 tablespoons, 1 serving, delivers close to 200 calories. A standard 16-ounce jar holds over 2,000 calories total. For an adult with moderate activity levels, that is approximately 1 full day of caloric intake from a single jar. The structural composition is what distinguishes it from other calorie-dense options. Fat, protein, and carbohydrates in a ratio the body processes gradually. No sharp glucose spike, no subsequent crash. Sustained energy release extending over several hours. In a crisis where meal timing becomes unpredictable, that slow burn profile is the difference between sustained function and cycling through energy spikes and deficits. The appetite suppression factor is worth understanding separately. Sustained stress triggers the release of adrenaline and cortisol. Both suppress appetite, sometimes severely. People in genuine emergencies consistently report knowing intellectually that they need to eat while feeling no physiological drive to do so. The body still requires fuel regardless of whether it is asking for it. Peanut butter bypasses that barrier more reliably than almost anything else in a no-cook supply. Soft texture, mild flavor, minimal physical effort to consume, no strong aromas that become aversive under stress. People eat it even when they do not feel hungry. That specific characteristic is not captured by calorie counts alone. 3 jars minimum, rotate regularly, compatible with nearly every other item on this list. Number 5. Jerky. The documentation behind jerky as a preservation method spans dozens of independent cultures on every inhabited continent, each arriving at the same solution independently. That convergence is not coincidental. Removing moisture from meat eliminates the biological conditions that allow bacterial growth. What remains is concentrated protein compressed into a fraction of the original weight. Shelf-stable without refrigeration. 1 ounce delivers 9 to 10 grams of complete protein. For protein density relative to weight carried, very few foods compete. The tension worth planning around. Jerky is inherently high in sodium. That sodium is not incidental, it is part of the preservation mechanism. But high sodium intake increases thirst, and without adequate hydration to offset it, the same characteristic that makes the food safe to store creates a compounding physiological demand. This does not make jerky problematic. It makes it a food that requires a water plan alongside it. Maintain water access when jerky is a significant component of daily intake. Pair with moisture-rich items. Canned soup offsets the fluid demand while adding caloric density. Think of jerky as a protein component rather than a standalone meal. Wrapped in a tortilla with canned beans, it becomes a nutritionally balanced meal. Eaten alone across multiple days, the sodium load compounds. Per gram of protein carried, it earns its place. Always plan the water alongside it. Number 4. Canned soup. Every other item on this list addresses calories, protein, fat, or carbohydrates. This one addresses something that receives almost no attention in standard emergency food planning and quietly becomes one of the most critical factors when a disruption extends beyond the first few days. Fluid intake. The body requires water at every level of function: cardiovascular performance, neurological clarity, temperature regulation, digestion. In most real emergency scenarios, water access becomes complicated in some way, limited, uncertain, or rationed. Canned soup is the only item on this list that delivers both solid nutrition and liquid in a single package. The broth contributes meaningfully to daily fluid intake. No protein bar, no handful of nuts, no bag of jerky can do that work. When water is being rationed, a can of soup performs dual function that nothing else in a no-cook supply can replicate. The second benefit compounds as the emergency extends. After several days of eating dry, dense, chewy food, the body begins resisting it. Research on dietary monotony identifies this as a measurable physiological response distinct from stress-related appetite suppression, but equally real in its effect on caloric intake. Soup breaks that pattern, soft, liquid, gentle on a digestive system that has been processing hard food under sustained stress. The heat assumption. Most people believe canned soup requires warming. It does not. Consumed directly from the can at room temperature, it remains a complete and viable food source. Warming improves the experience. When heat is unavailable, it is not required. Prioritize lower sodium varieties, especially if jerky is already in the supply. Pair with crackers or a tortilla to increase caloric density. One can becomes a genuinely satisfying meal without any preparation. Number 3. Pouched fish. The failure point most people discover only after experiencing an extended disruption. A sealed can without a can opener is not food. It is a sealed container. People who have managed extended outages report this consistently. Adequate food stored, no way to access it. A can opener is always within reach in a functional kitchen. In an evacuation or prolonged blackout, that assumption fails. Pouches eliminate that failure point entirely. A pull tab or tear strip opens in seconds, no tools required. Lighter and more compact than cans, no sharp edges. The nutritional case is equally direct. A single standard pouch of tuna, salmon, or mackerel delivers 16 to 20 grams of complete protein. No utensils, no heat, no water, no preparation. Open the seal. Eat. When protein intake drops during high-demand periods, the body does not wait. It draws from muscle tissue to meet demand, a process that can accelerate within days under physical and psychological strain, reducing strength, endurance, and cognitive sharpness simultaneously. Salmon carries an additional benefit worth noting separately. It is one of the most concentrated, shelf-stable sources of omega-3 fatty acids available. Research links omega-3 intake to neurological function and cognitive clarity under sustained pressure. In a high-stress environment where judgment quality directly affects outcomes, that is a functional nutrition consideration, not a wellness preference. Keep several on hand, rotate periodically into regular meals and replace them. The packaging is as operationally important as the protein inside it. Number 2. Canned beans. If every other item were removed from consideration and only one food category remained, this would be the strongest candidate to fill the remaining space. Canned beans deliver what almost no other single shelf-stable food can claim: 3 nutritional pillars simultaneously in a ready-to-eat package. Protein, carbohydrates, dietary fiber. Protein maintains muscle during physical stress. Carbohydrates supply fuel. Fiber slows digestion and stabilizes blood glucose, stretching the energy window of each meal and reducing the frequency at which the body demands to be fed again. Together, these 3 produce sustained stable energy for hours. The combination keeps a person functioning physically and cognitively across long, demanding stretches in a way that no single macronutrient food can replicate. The operational detail that makes this practical rather than just nutritionally impressive: canned beans are fully cooked during the canning process. No heat required, no water required. Open the container and the food is ready. For maximum accessibility, pull tab lids. This removes the can opener dependency entirely. The compatibility across the rest of this list is worth naming explicitly: beans on crackers, beans inside a tortilla with tuna, beans stirred into canned soup to increase protein density, beans alongside nuts. In nearly every combination, beans contribute meaningfully without competing with or overwhelming the other components. Cost. Shelf life measured in years. Caloric value per dollar spent. By every practical measure, canned beans are among the most efficient emergency foods available in standard retail. Stock variety: black beans, kidney beans, chickpeas. Rotate through normal cooking and make restocking automatic. A permanent replenishing part of household inventory, not a one-time emergency purchase. Number 1. Ready-to-eat packaged meals. Every other item on this list asks something from the person consuming it: a decision about what to combine, a moment of assembly, some presence of mind to take separate components and produce something adequate from them. Under normal conditions, that cognitive overhead is negligible. Under genuine crisis conditions, exhausted, running on fragmented sleep, managing multiple simultaneous demands, operating in an unfamiliar environment, that overhead becomes a real and measurable cost. The mental load of deciding what to eat, how to combine it, and how much to use compounds on top of everything else already being demanded. Ready-to-eat packaged meals eliminate that cost entirely, fully prepared, nutritionally designed as a complete meal. Sealed, durable packaging, open and eat. No assembly. No decisions. No effort. Quality ready-to-eat meals are formulated to deliver a genuine macronutrient balance. Protein, carbohydrates, and fat in proportions calibrated to support both physical performance and cognitive function in a single serving. 350 to 600 calories per package with complete protein and a range of micronutrients. That is a categorically different nutritional profile from improvised combinations of individual items. The psychological dimension documented in decision fatigue research: the number of decisions a person must make is as cognitively taxing as their complexity. Eliminating even small decisions during high-stress periods has a measurable effect on overall functioning capacity. Removing the meal decision entirely during the hardest moments of a disruption is a genuine form of cognitive load reduction, not a comfort consideration. The limitation is straightforward: cost. Ready-to-eat packaged meals are more expensive per calorie than anything else on this list. For that reason, they function as a complement, the zero-effort fallback reserved for the hardest moments, not the primary foundation of a supply. Keep enough for 1 to 2 complete meals per person for the anticipated duration. Fill the remainder of the supply with the lower-cost, high-efficiency options covered throughout this list. Here is the system these 12 items form together. Pouched fish and canned beans anchor protein. Peanut butter, nuts, and jerky deliver caloric density and sustained fat energy. Crackers and tortillas provide carbohydrate structure and convert separate ingredients into portable meals. Instant oats and protein bars cover energy delivery across different time windows. Canned fruit and canned soup address hydration, micronutrients, and the textural variety the body signals for after several days of monotony. Ready-to-eat meals cover the moments when everything else requires more cognitive overhead than is available. The gap between a basic pantry and a functional emergency supply is almost never about quantity. It is about structural completeness, understanding which specific gaps exist and closing them before conditions reveal them. One item underneath everything else on this list that most people leave out even after building a careful supply: water. A food supply without adequate water is not a preparedness plan. The human body manages weeks without food under the right conditions. Without water, that window closes in approximately 72 hours. 1 gallon per person per day is the documented emergency baseline. A 2-week supply for 2 adults, 28 gallons. Several items on this list, instant oats, canned soup, depend on water access either directly or indirectly. Plan water alongside the food, not as an afterthought to it. The gap between prepared and unprepared households almost never comes down to specialized knowledge or survival skills. It comes down to whether someone in a calm moment made a small number of specific decisions and put the right things on a shelf before conditions made those decisions competitive. Power goes out without warning. Grocery shelves empty within hours of any significant weather event. Cooking infrastructure fails the moment gas lines are interrupted or evacuation becomes necessary. In those moments, the household that built this supply does not need to solve a new problem. They solved it already.